We have reached the 5th round of elimination bracket play. The winner of this contest will advance to the semifinals match. This contest features Jackson Preparatory School and Mississippi Pinebelt. Let's meet the teams.
Walker Pierce, sophomore.
Joseph Burkell, freshman.
Anna Rachel Krebs, junior.
Jaden Hibbets, sophomore.
Jake Matthews, sophomore.
Selby Ireland, senior.
Ty Usey, senior.
Edward Wilson, sophomore.
We'll begin with round 1. For 5 points, name the largest Caribbean island that is also an independent country.
Cuba.
Yes.
For 10 points, who was the only African queen in the title of a Shakespearean play?
Cleopatra.
Yes.
For 15 points, what was the name of the primary river across which mythological Charon rode?
Styx.
Yes.
For 10 points, it's a math question. The ratio of 3x to the quantity 3x minus 20 is equal to 6 when x has what value?
Pinebelt, Chelsea.
20.
No. Dr. Brett, Silver. 8. Yes.
For 20 points, what was the famous knot cut by Alexander the...
Pinebelt, Walker.
The Gordian.
For 10 points, it's another math question. Find the sum of the greatest common factor and least common multiple of 12x and 16x.
52x. Yes.
For 15 points, which term derived from the Russian word for majority is...
Dr. Brett, time.
Bolshevik.
Yes.
For 10 points, which 7-letter word beginning with the letter S as an adjective means faithful and as a verb means to stop the flow of blood or tears?
Dr. Brett, Jake.
Staunch.
Yes.
For 20 points, identify the river flowing past the University of Glasgow in Scotland whose name scientist William Thomson adopted for the temperature scale he developed.
Dr. Brett, time.
The Kelvin.
Yes.
For 10 points, which U.S. president suffered a heart attack on September 24, 1955?
Dr. Brett, Jake.
Eisenhower.
Yes.
For 10 points, name the biblical person who was the wife of Uriah the Hittite, the second.
Dr. Brett, time.
Bathsheba.
Yes.
For 10 points, you'll need your pencil. Which pair of prime numbers has a sum of 32 and a product of 247?
Dr. Brett, time.
13 and 17.
Pinebelt, Walker.
13 and 19.
Yes.
For 15 points, what is the English name for Jarabe Tapatio, a popular Mexican dance?
Pinebelt, Anna Rachel.
Salsa.
No. Dr. Brett, time.
Tango.
No.
It's the hat dance. For 5 points, which word used as slang for legitimate and permissible literally designates food prepared in accord with Jewish dietary?
Pinebelt, Walker.
Kosher.
Yes.
For 10 points, what is the full name of the procedure known as an MRI, which...
Dr. Brett, time.
Magnetic resonance imaging.
Yes.
For 20 points, the felt hat linked with Humphrey Bogart and Frank Sinatra is again in fashion. What word beginning with F?
Pinebelt, Walker.
Fedora.
Yes.
For 10 points, it's a math question. What is the geometric mean of 18 and 8?
Dr. Brett, Jake.
13.
No.
Time? It was 12. For 10 points, Limestone is impure calcium carbonate. What are the three elements that make up calcium carbonate?
Mississippi Pine Belt, Walker.
Calcium, carbon, and oxygen.
Yes.
For 10 points, what is the name of the material used to hold bricks together in a...
Mississippi Pine Belt, Walker.
Mortar.
Yes.
For 15 points, which bird was sacred to the ancient Egyptians?
Mississippi Pine Belt, Walker.
The ibis.
Yes.
For 10 points, which state, whose name probably comes from an Indian word meaning little spring,
Mississippi Pine Belt, Anna Rachel.
Mississippi,
No.
is the...
Jackson Prep, time.
Minnesota.
No.
It was Arizona. All right. And that's the end of round one. We'll be back in a moment with a preliminary score. At the end of round one, the score is Jackson Prep 115, Mississippi Pinebelt 100. Let's begin round two. For 10 points, it's a math question. If three congruent squares are placed in a row to form a rectangle with a perimeter of 160 inches, what is the area of one of the three squares?
Jackson Prep, time.
400 square centimeters.
Yes.
For 10 points, what word designates both the spectators?
Boats.
Hmm?
Boats.
I'm sorry. That's my bad. Your bonus questions, Jackson Prep. Identify each of the following associated with the word death. For 5 points, which part of East Central California near the Nevada border became a national monument in 1933 and a national park in 1994? Its lowest point, at 282 feet below sea level, is the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere.
Death Valley.
Yes.
For 10 points, name the person with a broken leg who escaped on horseback to Virginia, where federal troops trapped him in a barn near Fort Royal and shot him to death in 1865.
John Wilkes Booth.
Yes.
For 15 points, the death of which Supreme Court justice occurred on September 19th, 2020?
Ginsburg.
Ginsburg.
Yes.
For 20 points, what name is given to the 70-mile death march that 40,000 troops were forced to make to prison camps in the Philippines in 1942 after they surrendered to the Japanese?
Another Baton Death March.
The Baton Death March.
Yes.
And we're back to a toss-up for 10 points. What word designates both the spectators of a golf match and an exhibit hall for paintings, such as the...
Mississippi Pine Belt, Anna Rachel.
a gallery,
Yes.
And here are your bonus questions. Identify each of the following parts of a flower. For 5 points, pollen-containing sac of the male organs.
Stamen,
No.
Jackson Prep.
The pistil.
No.
It's the anther. So we go back to a toss-up for 10 points. What word beginning with P designates a dummy pill used in controlled?
Mississippi Pine Belt, Anna Rachel.
placebo,
Yes.
And here are your bonus questions. Identify each of the following concerning U.S. presidents. For 5 points, in 1990, President H.W. Bush set a goal of putting a man on Mars. Which year, the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing, did he set as the Mars landing date?
2019,
Yes.
For 10 points, one during whose administration the Teapot Dome scandal occurred.
Reagan,
No.
Jackson Prep.
Harding.
Yes.
And we go back to a toss-up for 20 points. Who was the American abstract expressionist who became famous for what is sometimes called drip painting?
Mississippi Pine Belt, Joseph.
Warhol,
No. Jackson Prep, time.
Pollock.
Yes.
And here are your bonus questions. Identify the states in which the following groups of cities are located. For 5 points, Lewiston, Auburn, and Bangor.
No, Bangor. It's Maine, right? Maine.
Yes.
For 10 points, Enid, Broken Arrow, and Norman.
Oklahoma.
Yes.
For 15 points, Worcester, New Bedford, and Lowell.
Ohio.
No.
Connecticut.
No.
The answer is Massachusetts. So we move back to a toss-up question for 15 points. What two-word term designates the concentration of a particular component in a solution based on the number of moles of the component in question divided by the total number of moles of all the components present in the solution?
Jackson Prep tie.
Molar concentration.
No. Mississippi Pine Belt, Anna Rachel.
Molar solvency.
No.
It was mole fraction. For 20 points, which English poet wrote the following lines? A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Pierian spring. He does so in an essay on criticism.
Mississippi Pine Belt, Joseph.
Poe. Poe.
No. Jackson Prep tie.
Tennyson.
No.
The answer was Alexander Pope. Yes. All right. And that's the end of round 2. We'll be back in a moment with a preliminary score. At the end of round 2, the score is Jackson Prep 220, Mississippi Pinebelt 125. Let's get started with round 3. It's a 5-point toss-up. Which word designates both a vain, strutting person and a male peafowl?
Mississippi Pine Belt, Walker.
A gamecock.
No.
Brightly colored plumage.
Jackson Prep, Selby.
Peacock.
Say again.
Peacock.
Spell it.
P-E-A-C-O-C-K.
Yes.
All right, here are your bonus questions. Identify each of the following concerning fictional characters. For 5 points, name Ernest Hemingway's most prominent character in the novelette, The Old Man and the Sea.
Santiago.
Yes.
For 10 points, character who went into retirement in Sussex, keeping bees.
Holmes.
Yes.
For 15 points, who was the daughter of the protagonist, Hester Prynne, in the novel The Scarlet Letter.
Amber.
No.
Pearl.
Yes.
And so we go back to a toss-up for 15 points. What is the basic philosophy espoused by Jean-Paul Sartre in his...
Jackson Prep, tie.
Existentialism.
Yes.
And here are your bonus questions. Identify each of the following concerning phrases. For 5 points, 2-word Latin one used to describe a government existing by fact and not by choice or law.
De facto.
Yes.
For 10 points, 2-word one borrowed from the racetrack for an unexpected winner in a race, especially used to refer to political candidates who get a nomination unexpectedly.
Dark horse.
Yes.
For 15 points, 2-word one meaning someone who receives less attention than he should, derived from a 1932 Franklin Roosevelt campaign speech for a New Deal plan that began with those at the bottom of the economic pyramid.
The Forgotten Man.
Yes.
For 20 points, which phrase using the name of a British livery stable owner means a choice without alternatives, meaning no real choice at all?
Hamstringed.
No.
Mississippi Pinebelt.
Ultimatum.
No.
It's Hobson's choice. And we go back to a toss-up for 10 points. Which name designates a tower, common in Asia, having several stories, each?
Jackson Prep, tie.
Pagoda.
Yes.
And here are your bonus questions. Identify each of the following teachers. For 5 points, who was Alexander the Great's famous teacher?
Aristotle.
Yes.
For 10 points, she graduated from Southern Methodist University in 1968 with a bachelor's degree in education and took a job as a second-grade teacher. After attaining her master's degree in library science, she was employed as a librarian before marrying a politician.
Bush.
More specific?
Barbara Bush.
Yes.
It's Laura Bush.
No, nobody said?
Hmm?
Okay,
He
I'm
said
sorry.
Barbara.
Okay, I'm sick.
So they don't get that 10
No.
points.
No, that's wrong.
Okay. And they don't get the opportunity.
Give them the next question.
I'll give you the next question for 15 points. Tennessee teacher arrested in 1925 for violating state ban on teaching evolution.
Scoops.
Scopes.
Yes.
Yes. And we go back to a toss-up. It's a math question for 15 points. From an external point, two tangents are drawn to a circle. If the lengths of the tangents are 7x minus 20 and 3x plus 8 units, how long is each of these tangents?
Jackson Prep, Edward.
7.
No. Mississippi Pinebelt, Joseph.
4.
No.
It's 29 units. For 15 points, you might need a pencil for this one. Write a balanced equation for the reaction between hydrogen gas and oxygen gas to form water.
Jackson Prep, Selby.
2H2 plus O2 yields 2H2O.
No. Mississippi Pinebelt, Joseph.
2H plus O equals 2.
No. It's not the question.
Yeah, I'd have to finish the question for you to get the correct answer. What is the sum of the coefficients in the balanced equation? So it's 5 times 2H2 plus O2 equals 2H2O. And that's the end of round 3. We'll be back in a moment with a preliminary score. At the end of round 3, the score is Jackson Prep 300, Mississippi Pinebelt 155. Let's move into round 4. The first toss-up is worth 10 points. What word designates both a long, low ship propelled by oars and sails?
Mississippi Pinebelt, Walker.
Galley.
Yes.
For 10 points, the King James Version of Deuteronomy 8:3 expresses the idea that man needs spiritual fulfillment, not just worldly goods. It expresses this idea as man shall not live by.
Mississippi Pinebelt, Walker.
Bread.
Yes.
For 20 points, which Secretary of State, later a U.S. President, helped formulate the Monroe Doctrine?
Jackson Prep, Edward.
Thomas Jefferson?
No. Mississippi Pinebelt, Anna Rachel.
John Adams.
Yes.
For 15 points, identify the leading 18th century Italian maker of stringed instruments. More.
Jackson Prep, Selby.
Stradivarius.
Yes.
For 10 points, identify the 2 African countries whose names end in the letters D-A.
Jackson Prep, Jake.
Uganda and Rwanda.
Yes.
It's a math question for 10 points. An urn contains 7 orange balls, 8 purple balls, and 4 red balls. If one ball is drawn randomly from the urn, what is the probability that it will not be red?
Jackson Prep, Selby.
15 out of 19.
Yes.
For 5 points, what is the character in a children's story who tells the other animals that the sky is falling after being...
Mississippi Pinebelt, Anna Rachel.
Chicken Little.
Yes.
For 20 points, which doctor of the church identified 8 kinds of lies, not all of them equally serious? He was the 4th and 5th century bishop of Hippo.
Jackson Prep, Ty.
St. Augustine.
Yes.
For 10 points, which animal is the chief symbol of the goddess Athena?
Jackson Prep, Edward.
Owl.
Yes.
For 10 points, name the 2 largest South American countries according to area.
Jackson Prep, Ty.
Brazil and Argentina.
Yes.
For 20 points, which person who had been with Jesus during his earthly ministry was elected by lot to take the place of Judas as an apostle?
Mississippi Pinebelt, Anna Rachel.
Matthias.
Yes.
For 10 points, which name did an Iraqi painter use to convey the idea that life goes on as normal in Baghdad despite the threat of war in 2003 when he said, "We are like the musicians on the blank"?
Mississippi Pinebelt, Walker.
Titanic.
Yes.
For 20 points, Which Scandinavian country sold the Virgin Islands to the United States for 20?
Jackson Prep, tie.
Denmark.
Yes.
For 10 points, identify the chemical substances secreted chiefly by endocrine glands and used as chemical messengers.
Mississippi Prep, Jackson Prep, tie.
Hormones.
Yes.
You'll need your pencil for this one. It's worth 5 points. If kilo is 10 to the third power, what power of 10 does mega represent?
Jackson Prep, Selby.
6.
Yes.
For 10 points, a 1997 book by poet Neil Bowers tells of his efforts to track down the person who copied one of his poems, altered the first line, and then published it under his own name. What word beginning with the letter P designates one who...
Mississippi Pinebelt and original.
Plagiarist?
Yes.
For 15 points, in 1984, Ronald Reagan, the 73-year-old incumbent presidential candidate, said about which 56-year-old opponent during...
Jackson Prep, tie.
Walter Mondale.
Yes.
For 10 points, 2 of the 3 terms used to designate the isomers of xylene are ortho and meta. What is the name of the third isomer?
Mississippi Pinebelt, Joseph.
Alpha.
No. Jackson Prep, tie.
Pro.
No.
It's para. For 20 points, to which country did Germany send the Zimmermann telegram?
Jackson Prep, Edward.
Mexico?
Yes.
For 5 points, in accepting the Democratic nomination for the presidency, which future president said, I pledge myself to a New Deal for the American...
Jackson Prep, Jake.
FDR.
Yes.
For 10 points, of the 4 U.S. states whose names begin with the letter A, identify the one whose capital has a 2-word name.
Mississippi Pinebelt and original.
Arizona?
No. Jackson Prep, Edward.
Arkansas?
Yes.
For 20 points, what is the animal nickname of Harry Angstrom, the main character in John Updike's series of 4 novels that chronicle American life in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, 2 of which have won Pulitzer Prizes?
No.
And that concludes the end of round 4. We'll be back in a moment with a final score. At the end of 4 rounds of play, Jackson Prep had 460 points, Mississippi Pinebelt 240 points. Jackson Prep advances to the semifinals match.